Many people yearn for life abroad, but in reality, a woman living overseas can feel so lonely and isolated. Fortunately, I met a handsome young man. A 20-year-old gives me a different sense of youth. Whenever I walk on the streets of this unfamiliar country, my eyes unconsciously search for that tall figure, even though I know he might be immersed in his studies at the university library or sweating it out on the basketball court with friends. I am 35 years old, and my son Wada is 19 this year. He has already grown taller than me, and every time I stand next to him, I feel an inexplicable pride and a sense of being cherished. Although I am a full-time stay-at-home mom, in this strange land, my identity is not just a mother, but also an international student mom. I accompanied Wada here just so he could receive an education in a broader environment, cultivating his vision and abilities. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and hear faint sounds coming from the kitchen. Pushing open the door, I see Wada frying eggs, with my favorite coffee beside him. He turns to me with a smile and says, "Good morning, Mom." My heart always warms at this. I feel so lucky to have this grown son. However, life as an international student is not always so peaceful. Sometimes he faces various academic challenges and confusions, as well as conflicts with friends. I always comfort him, telling him that growth comes with various tests, and every setback will become a stepping stone for his future success. In this unfamiliar country, I watch my son mature day by day, becoming more independent. I know that all the efforts and sacrifices I make for him are worth it. His every smile and every progress is my greatest pride. It wasn't until one day that I realized being a mother of a teenage son is actually quite difficult. That night, I went to the bathroom and suddenly heard sounds coming from my son's bedroom, voices of a man and a woman, though in a foreign language. I could tell they were the kind of sounds that make one blush and heart race. I couldn't help but be curious, peeking through the door crack to see my son lying on the bed, with a computer beside him, and the sounds were coming from it. My son was lying on the bed, the blanket covering his legs, but I could see his hands moving quickly up and down near his stomach. I knew he was doing something embarrassing. Back in my room, I thought for a long time about how to face this matter with my son. As a mother, I should perhaps give him the right guidance, but I didn't want him to feel embarrassed or humiliated. The next morning, when the sunlight streamed through the curtains, brightening the room, I gathered my courage and decided to find an appropriate moment to talk to Wada. After breakfast, I softly said to Wada, "There's something I want to talk to you about. Do you have time?" He looked at me, seemingly puzzled, but nodded. We sat on the sofa in the living room. I tried to relax and began, "Last night, I passed by your room and accidentally saw what was happening in there. I don't want to blame or criticize you, but I think there are some things we should discuss openly." Wada clearly felt awkward. He lowered his head and didn't speak. I continued, "I understand that you are now a big boy, and your body and emotions are developing, and sometimes you may have such needs. But I hope you can understand that for such content, you need to have a correct understanding and attitude." He looked up at me, his eyes showing a hint of confusion and bewilderment. I gently held his hand and continued, "Loving your body is something everyone should do. But at the same time, you should cherish your spirit. Excessive indulgence in such videos may have a negative impact on your mind and emotions." Wada sighed and listened seriously. After a while, he said, "Mom, thank you for understanding me. I will be careful." I gently patted the back of his hand and smiled, "As long as you understand, that's good." That day, our conversation was so simple, but I believe we established a new bond between us, a deep understanding and trust between mother and son. In that moment, seeing Weida's state, what surged in my mind was not just a simple mother's concern, but a deep resonance, a long-suppressed emotion. Loneliness and solitude, these two words seem to have become my daily life in this unfamiliar country. Every day, I arrange my life meticulously, but behind all this, I feel an endless emptiness. Weida has his life, his friends, and his studies, while I can only confine myself in this small world all alone. Whenever the night is quiet, I lie in bed, fantasizing about a man who can understand me, care for me, and give me a warm embrace. This desire is not just emotional. It also includes physical needs. The young me still has that unique passion and desire of a woman, but after a long time without a man's company, these feelings have been deeply suppressed. That night, seeing Weida, I suddenly realized that I also have my own needs. So, when my son is not around, I learned to release myself. I would turn on the warm water in the shower, and like a baby, I would use my hands to give myself a bit of satisfaction. But this way is still different from real contact, so I still long for a man to enter my life and get close to my body. One day, while walking downstairs, I met a boy around 20 years old, tall and handsome, with the black hair and yellow skin of a Chinese boy, but with the strong physique of a foreigner. Just as my heart raced, thinking I shouldn't have thoughts about this boy, a woman in her 40s with yellow skin appeared in front of me. She was the boy's mother. She took the initiative to greet me, and I learned her name was Susan. She is also a resident of our building, probably moved in not long ago, as I had never seen her before. She took the initiative to invite me to their home, and since her son had already captured my heart, I was very willing to visit them. To avoid appearing too purposeful, I planned to bring my son Weida along to visit them. When Weida and I walked into Susan's house, the first thing that caught my eye was a spacious and bright living room. Susan wore a tight red dress that highlighted her elegant curves, a golden necklace hanging around her slender neck, and her long hair gently draped over her shoulders. Her temperament, like her home, exuded a simple yet charming beauty. Susan's son was dressed in a black short-sleeved t-shirt and jeans, and his sun-kissed skin looked exceptionally healthy. From his defined jawline and sharp gaze, I saw a youthful vitality. "This is my son, Alex." Susan stood up to introduce us. "Nice to meet you." Alex smiled as he stood up, his handshake firm, and I could feel the warmth from his palm, making my heart race. However, what I didn't expect was that my son Weida's eyes were already glued to Susan. Her mature charm was somewhat similar to my younger self, and I could only think that perhaps this was why he was attracted to her. Whenever Susan spoke to him, Weida would shyly lower his head, but his gaze was filled with curiosity about her. During the tour of Susan's house, I was full of curiosity about her home decor style and various furnishings. When I followed Alex into his bedroom, I was immediately drawn to the neatly arranged books and various trophies. His room had a youthful vibe. Items like a soccer ball, guitar, and photography equipment indicated that he was a vibrant and passionate young man. Just as I casually glanced at the small bookshelf, my attention was caught by something cup-like. I felt a slight stir in my heart but pretended not to see it. However, I could feel my face getting very hot, probably turning a shade of crimson. Alex clearly also noticed the awkward presence of that little object. He reached out and quickly put it away in the drawer. Then he looked up, his face slightly flushed, and exchanged a smile with me. At that moment, time seemed to slow down. His smile carried a hint of awkwardness, but more so a sense of honesty and straightforwardness. This straightforwardness made me feel that he didn't need to feel ashamed about it. After all, everyone has their own secrets. After that, we continued to tour other rooms, but I still lingered on the subtle feeling from that moment. That night when I got home, I kept thinking about that moment with Alex in his bedroom. That cup was clearly much larger than the ones we have back home. I wondered if foreigners really have larger ones than us, and thinking about this made the impulse in my heart linger. Just as my body was heating up and my face was burning, my phone suddenly made a notification sound, catching my attention. I opened it to see a message from Alex. I didn't expect him to contact me so soon. He wrote, "Hi, I'm Alex. I'm really sorry about that little thing in the study today. Haha, I thought maybe I should explain it to you." I was a bit surprised by his openness and generosity, but at the same time, I found it refreshing. I replied, "Haha, it's fine, everyone has their little secrets. I don't mind." He quickly replied, "Thank you so much for understanding. You know, young people here might be a bit more open, but I really don't want to leave you with a bad impression." I laughed and replied, "You've already left an impression, but it's not a bad one. It's a real and interesting impression." He replied more directly, "Then I think I should tell you that when I saw you today, I also felt a bit flushed and my heart raced." When I read this message, my heart raced faster and a blush crept onto my face. I never expected him to be so direct. I stared blankly at the phone screen, unsure how to respond. After a moment, I typed, "You saying that makes me, a big woman, not know how to respond." He replied, "So can we continue this interesting exchange? I believe that despite the age difference, we can learn a lot from each other." I smiled slightly, feeling that this young man really had a special charm, and replied, "Then let's continue. I hope we can both find joy in this exchange. Alex, you know, the first time I saw you, I was attracted by your perfect figure. That dress you wore really suited you, making you look both noble and sexy." I felt a bit shy and replied, "You saying that makes me, a big woman, feel a bit embarrassed." "Alex, you shouldn't think of yourself as a big woman. Every contour and line of yours looks so youthful and vibrant. There's a deep charm in your eyes that's hard not to be attracted to." I felt my heart race a bit and replied, "Are you praising me for some purpose?" "Alex, if there is a purpose, I hope to get to know you better and get closer to you. I know this might sound a bit forward, but every time I see you, I feel a strong urge to get closer and be near you." I took a deep breath and replied, "I admit your words make me a bit excited. My days here are actually quite lonely, so I also want to find some passion and excitement. Alex, then we can start as friends, gradually getting to know each other and see if we can find that excitement." I smiled slightly and replied, "Sounds interesting. I'm willing to give it a try." One afternoon, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows onto the warm yellow carpet, filling the room with tranquility and harmony. I was wearing a light sleepwear set, preparing to enjoy a lazy afternoon. Suddenly, I heard the doorbell. I tidied my messy hair a bit and opened the door. It was Alex. He looked a bit nervous, with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. When he saw me in my light sleepwear, a slight blush appeared on his face. "Hi, I'm sorry, did I disturb your rest?" he said awkwardly. "It's fine, come in." I opened the door and let him in. As soon as he entered, he saw my pajamas again, and the blush in his eyes became more pronounced. I coughed lightly, trying to break the subtle atmosphere. But he seemed unable to control his impulses, suddenly rushing over to hug me, and I could clearly feel his strength and the grandeur of a foreign man. His breathing was rapid, and I could feel the strong beating of his chest. My heart was conflicted. On one hand, I knew this might not be right, but on the other hand, I also craved this physical and emotional connection. After such a long time of loneliness and waiting, I also began to look forward to this passion. His lips were warm, gently brushing against my ear, whispering, "You know, from the first moment I saw you, I couldn't control myself." I gently pushed him away, breathing a bit rapidly. "Alex, we can't do this." He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret and desire. I know this isn't right, but I really can't control myself. "I'm sorry." I sighed. "We're both adults. We should understand how to control our impulses better. But I understand you, and I appreciate your honesty." Although we didn't take that final step, in that moment I could feel every detail of Alex's body, every breath he took, the rise and fall of his chest made my heart race. His hand wrapped around my waist, pulling me tighter, so tight that I could feel every inch of his skin. The strength of a foreign man was completely different from my previous experiences. I could feel his power, but I also sensed his tenderness. My face was pressed against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, fast and strong. His fingers gently traced circles on my back, bringing me an unprecedented sense of comfort. We held each other tightly, as if the whole world had disappeared, leaving just the two of us. At that moment, I really wanted time to stop, to let this moment last forever. "I wish this moment could last forever," he whispered in my ear. I slightly raised my head to look at him, just gently nodding, but my eyes already revealed all the answers. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. The outside world, the noisy sounds, were all isolated by this deep emotion. I tightly closed my eyes, wanting to feel the beauty of this moment more deeply. I don't know how long it took, but I gradually came back to my senses. He also loosened his grip, and we both felt a bit awkward, but our eyes revealed mutual understanding and appreciation. I gently took his hand. "We should still exercise some restraint." He nodded. "I know, but I'm really glad to have met you." I smiled slightly. "Me too." Whenever my son is not home, that secret little signal will ring on my phone. It's a message from Alex. I would tidy myself up, waiting for his arrival. Every time he came, it brought a familiar yet novel excitement, as if every meeting was the first time. I still remember one time, the afterglow of the sunset shone on the living room floor, the room filled with a warm fragrance. I leaned on the sofa, feeling a bit nervous. When he came in, our eyes met, and that electric feeling made my heart race. He sat next to me, gently holding me, and our eyes locked. His hand slid from my back to my waist, gently scratching, making my body involuntarily shiver slightly. That gentle touch flowed through every corner of my body like spring water. I also reached out, exploring his face, from forehead to chin, feeling his slightly bearded face. Our breathing gradually quickened, our faces close enough to feel each other's exhaled warmth. Our lips met at that moment, gently, as if afraid to ruin this perfect moment. The feeling of kissing was both sweet and stimulating, neither of us willing to let go. Then, our kiss became deeper, our hands exploring each other, yet always maintaining that boundary, not letting things go to the final step. But this unresolved passion made us cherish it even more. This kind of day lasted for a while. Each intimacy was so pure, without any repression, as if we had returned to the initial feeling of falling in love. I sat in my son's room, gently holding up the computer. The screen displayed familiar images of my son and Susan, two young figures entwined together. I originally thought I would be shocked by that scene, but looking at the sincere eyes of the two on the screen, I instead felt a deep understanding. The blood flowing through them, their emotions and impulses, were so similar to my experiences at that moment. I secretly smiled, turned off the computer screen, and sat quietly for a moment, thinking of Susan and me, my son and her son, and the intricate emotional entanglements between the four of us. I suddenly felt that perhaps this was some kind of destined connection. We all have our loneliness, we are all seeking some kind of comfort and release, just in different ways. That night, I decided to have an open and honest talk with my son. I told him what I knew and also shared what was between Alex and me. Faced with such a mother, my son seemed a bit at a loss, but soon he told me that he and Susan were just the impulses of youth, but he was very clear about his bottom line. The two of us sat on the sofa in the living room, not speaking for a long time, but I knew our relationship had become closer because of it. Perhaps some things are indeed difficult to measure by moral standards. And the most important thing is that we can be responsible for ourselves and the people around us, facing our emotions authentically. Time flows like the water plants on the lake, swaying in the wind. In the long river of time, the relationships between Alex and me, my son and Susan, are like these water plants, free, subtle, yet resilient. Although many things in life cannot be viewed through conventional lenses, in our hearts, the memories of that time are so real and vivid. I often think of those times, sitting by the window at night, looking at the stars outside. The memories in my heart flow like the mighty Yangtze River, surging and overwhelming. I remember the snippets of sweet words with Alex, the deep emotional exchanges through our gazes, and the tacit understanding in our actions. Likewise, I will not forget my son's growth, his little stories with Susan, and our days abroad. My son and I seem to have developed a kind of tacit understanding. Whether he mentions Susan or I mention Alex, we respond with a smile and a glance. It is a mature, understanding, and profound feeling. Years later, when I set foot on my homeland again, everything seems so familiar yet strange. The prosperity and changes of the mainland stand in stark contrast to my experiences abroad. But I know that experience has been deeply etched in the depths of my soul, becoming an indelible mark in my life. Although my relationship with Alex has somewhat faded due to the distance, that feeling, that intimacy, remains unchanged. We still occasionally keep in touch, inquiring about each other's lives and reminiscing about those wonderful days. Now, I have reintegrated into life on the mainland, but that experience abroad in my heart shines like a gem, forever radiating brilliance and adding endless color to my life.